What a beautiful childhood used to sit on the swings and play. Oh, what I'm thinking about. Definitely, it's the memory of the childhood. So, here we talk about the concept of memory. What actually is memory? Anything that happened in the past, or you thought about something and you are trying to recall it back, recall the same information back, is what is explained as a memory. The first explanation of this memory in a very systematic form was laid down by Ebbinghaus. He was a German psychologist and he tried to explain that we do not forget the learned material at a even pace. That means whatever you have remembered in your childhood, you don't forget it completely. Let's say you learned a division trick. Still now you know how to divide, but might be there were five tricks that you remembered, that you learned during that time, and now you remember just one of that. So there has been forgetting, but it has not been at an equal pace and is not complete. You still remember a little of it. So that was what Ebbinghaus very first down in the very first round laid it down. The next important concept that came in was by Bartlett, and Bartlett basically focused on the concept that memory is never passive, it is active. That means with every new constructions that come in, there is a little modification in the same memory that is seen. So this memory is always a constructive process and it undergoes a continuous change over time. It is, we can say, not reproductive but definitely reconstructive. So that was the sole idea that was laid down by Bartlett. The next idea that comes in is how actually this process of memory flows in. So we have the three stages which are known as encoding, storage, and retrieval. Talking about encoding is what you are doing right now. You are recording the information that is being delivered here, and might be some of you are registering it for the first time or hearing it for the first time so that it can become usable for the future times to understand. The next stage is storage. Might be you would pause this video, you would rewind this video, you would listen that section again in order to store that. Once it is stored, you would go to your examination hall and retrieve that information. That means when there is a question on memory, you would start to answer that, and that is the process of retrieval. So whatever you have encoded and stored would be brought into your answer papers by then, and that is the idea under the process of memory. So it is, first of all, you encode the information, you store it, and finally you retrieve it. Now this works very similar to a computer system as was given under the stage theory, which is also known as the information processing approach, and this model was given by Atkinson and Sherfin, and in this theory they laid down that in a computer you have RAM and ROM, which is a temporary and a permanent storage. Similarly, in your brain you do have temporary storage units and permanent storage. That means some of the information is meant for temporary gain, you keep it for a while, you remove it. The other is there for a permanent understanding, and that is kept in the ROM or the permanent storage of your brain, as simple as that. So this whole model compares a computing system to a human brain. So in this, we have a information that comes in, and you have three structural components that are there, which is a sensory component, short-term memory, and a long-term memory. Sensory component is a component which is there for less than a second. That means there is a light coming in, the light gets turned off, still I have some aftershades of the light that is visible. My friend is playing a guitar. He stops playing, still I have the reverberations of the sound that is heard. So it could be visual, it could be echoic or auditory in nature, but it is sensory, it remains for a very short duration. But if I'm paying deep attention to it, it could translate into a short-term memory that I could remember that instance or remember that thing. So according to this information processing model, the short-term memory is encoded acoustically. That means by hearing, you are trying to have those unrehearsed words getting rehearsed in your minds, and this short-term memory lasts for less than 30 seconds. So that is where we can say it is fragile, but it is less fragile as compared to a sensory memory. The next is a long-term memory. When this short-term memory undergoes continuous rehearsals, I keep on practicing it, might be, it goes into my long-term memory. And this long-term memory is for a lifetime. So it's a permanent storage that could be seen. And the information is semantically encoded. That means I have understood that concept and now I know it. So if I say 2 plus 2 is 4, I know the concept of addition, and therefore if I am asked 2 plus 8, I am able to do it as 10. So that is where is the long-term memory, where you have the concept of encoding it semantically, that is taken into account. So under this information processing model, the first stage is understanding the structural components, which is sensory, short-term and long-term. Talking about the control process. Control process is when you have the information that moves. If there is a selective attention, it would go into the short-term memory. Within the short-term memory, there could be two ways under which you could remember it. The first is a maintenance rehearsal. That means I could repeat that information again and again in order to remember it, or I could do a chunking. That means break down the information into small chunks, and that could be, let's say, I have 3 years that are given. If they are written together, if there is a number that is written together, I can remember it as 1947 and 1949. So I'm breaking down that into chunks and remembering, let's say this is the year of India's independence and this is the year when the constitution was adopted. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to break this into two different sections, and this is what is known as chunking. This is what happens in the short-term memory. You have maintenance rehearsal and chunking. Then if I want to move it to a long-term memory, there need to be a elaborative rehearsal. That means let's say I need to understand the meaning of any of the words, let's say memory. So I understand the concept of memory. I might be understand this model or any other model, and then try to have a relation or build on to the existing information that I have, so that this information is semantically encoded and I try to understand this information. So this long-term memory focuses on elaborative rehearsals which take place. Later on, there were experiments that proved that initially under the stage model, we focused that short-term memory is encoded as acoustically, however long-term is encoded semantically, but later on it was disproved with the developments that came in under the levels of processing model. However, before that, we have another interesting model, which is the working memory model given by Bartlett. Now, this model focuses on the multi-component view of the short-term memory. Under this, Bartlett believed that memory is not passive and it is constantly handled by the working memory. So, there are three components to it. The first component is the phonological loop. Phonological loop talks about limited number of sounds and some unrehearsed concepts that are less than 2 seconds. The next is the Visuo-spatial Sketch Pad. That means whatever information you are getting in, You are trying to visualize it, create a mental image of it, and that mental image might be, let's say if I'm talking about cat. So the first component is the phonological, CAT, cat. So you understand the phonological term for that. In the second component, you have a mental image, the shape of a cat. And in the third component, which is the central executive, you are trying to gather information from the phonological loop, from the the Visuo-spatial Sketch Pad, as well as the long-term memory, and you might be able to produce the sound of the cat when you are trying to understand the phonology cat, seeing a mental image cat, and it's an animal that creates so and so sound. So that is a central executive component, and this was the model that was laid down by Bartlett. So the first model we talked about by Atkinson and Shirfin, the second model by Bartlett, the third important model is the levels of processing. Now, why does this model came into being? It was Shelley and Warrington who cited out that if a person meets an accident and a part of the brain is damaged, let's say left side of the cerebral hemisphere gets damaged, then it was found that the long-term memory is still intact, but the short-term memory is seriously affected. So, this model, which was given by Craik and Lockhart in 1972, tried to understand the levels of processing. They laid down 3 levels of processing. The first level is what is known as the structural processing or the structural level. Under this structural level, we are trying to understand the physical formations. So let's say if I write this, that means I am trying to understand the physical formation, the shape C, A and T. I don't understand what it is sounded like, what it is spelled like. I understand just the small letters or the capital letters or the colors that are used and the shapes that are drawn. So that is the structural or the physical aspect. The second component is the phonetic component, where I am able to pronounce this word rather than saying CAT, I say cat. So I am able to pronounce it. I am trying to have an intermediate level where I am attaching sound to the letter. And attaching this sound to the letter is very, very important. The third component is a semantic component. As we said, this is the deepest level of understanding, where as soon as the word cat comes in, I have a mental image saying that, okay, this is an animal with 4 legs having fur and running across the street. So that is what is a cat. Now, this is how we have the levels of processing. This level of processing, when further understood, there was the need to understand the long-term memory. So there are various types of long-term memory that we try to understand. So here I can say the long-term memory is divided into declarative memories and procedural memories. Later on, you have Tulving, who further classified this declarative memory as episodic memory and semantic memory. So this is the flowchart, we could say, for the long-term memory and its type. Now, what is a declarative memory? Knowing about facts, figures, names. So as soon as I meet you, I know your name, or I know the subject that you are studying, or might be I remember my birthday, I remember the birthdays of my near and dear ones. So what happens here is, this is a declarative memory that is there. We know our country's independence, we know some of the major national symbols across the nation. So those are some of the ideas which is declarative. On the other hand is procedural. Now this procedural relates to, I learned how to ride a bicycle in my childhood, but still if I am given a bicycle now, I can ride it. So that was a procedural memory. It went into my memory, and now if I am able to recall it, it is because I know the procedure. It's not declarative in nature. The facts that are retained or the facts that are addressed are under the declarative memory. However, under procedural memories, we are trying to understand the procedure of the content which could be easily delivered. The next is the Under the declarative memory, as Tulving suggested, you have either episodic memories or semantic memories. Episodic memories are biographies of certain life experiences that are there. Might be something that happened in your life which is hard to forget. It could be an emotional aspect associated to it. Let's say you came first in the class for the first time, how you felt about it. So that is a kind of emotional values being attached to something, and it is episodic. It might happen on a continuous or a regular interval, or it could happen for a single time, but this is definitely episodic. There were episodes that were there and you remember only those episodes. The next is semantic. Semantic says a memory about general awareness or knowledge, and that's what you remember at a deeper level. So let's say if I ask you 2 plus 2, you'll say 4. But if I ask you 2 plus 6, then also you'll say 8. That means you remember the concept of addition, and that's a kind of strengthening your understanding at a deeper level, but definitely knowing that you know the concept of addition. And that is the concept of semantic memory under the declarative memory. Besides this, there are three other interesting memories that we talk about in long term. These are flashbulb memories. Flashbulb memories are very detailed. The images are just frozen or imprinted into your minds, and they are tied to specific things that happened. Might be in your childhood, only once in your childhood you had a birthday celebration that was done, and that is a kind of flashbulb memory. It's frozen into your mind and you remember it very well. So it is having a deeper level in your memory, and it's going into a kind of much more detailed or minute things that had happened during that time. Okay, the next important is autobiographical memory. Autobiographical memory are personal memories, so they are not evenly distributed through the childhood. Let's say till the age of 4 to 5 years, what happened with me or what I did, I don't remember, and that is what is a childhood amnesia. It's not with me, it's with most of us. So what happens is, this is something that you totally forget. So you have a teen period or a kind of youth period where you remember most of it, and then with your old age, only the recent happenings is what you remember. So there is where we have the autobiographical memory. It is based on the personal memories. The next is implicit memory. Implicit memory is the same example of riding a cycle. Now, I learned the cycle back when I was a child, but if I'm asked to ride a cycle now, I would ride it. I don't know how, but it is implicit into my memory. That means I learned it and I'm not consciously putting effort. Okay, I'll catch the handles, I'll move the pedals, but it's automatically coming in. So this is what is a implicit memory. It is a kind of awareness that comes into a person's mind even when he is not willingly trying to put an effort to do it. As simple as that. So these long-term memories in the forms of concepts, in the forms of categories or schemas or mental images are organized, might be in a hierarchical fashion, so that we can better remember and understand and comprehend the concepts. Again, there is a very interesting concept where we understand the methods of measuring the memory. How do we actually measure the memory? There could be free recall and recognition. This is one of the common games that you might have played. You have 10 items that are shown, and then those are hidden, and then you are asked to recall what are the items that you saw. So might be it is not in the same order, it could be in the any order, but there is two probabilities: greater recognition for the first scene and the last scene items that are seen. And there is where the role of memory comes into play. The next is sentence verification tool. Now this helps you to measure the understanding, the semantic level. Where we have the knowledge that is there, it is explained in the form of sentences, and you are asked to verify those sentences, making it sure that you are able to understand and comprehend those sentences. The next is priming. Priming is when you are trying to measure something which cannot be done verbally. So the same example of riding a bicycle, it comes from an implicit memory. It's not explained verbally how I remember, how I actually do it. But this is priming. And this could be seen, let's say, when you are actually unaware of what is happening, but you do it. So it is recalled from the implicit memory that is there. You are only working in that direction and you will be able to work on the solution for that problem. So that is what is the methods of memory measurement. Coming on to knowledge representation and memory organization. It's very important to understand three terms: concept, category, and schema. So let's start it with a very simple example. I have the fruits. Now, what is this concept of fruit? Fruit is a category under which I have a concept of, let's say, mangoes. On the other hand, what I can do is I can make mango now a category, and I can put up different varieties of mangoes as a concept. So what a category and a concept is? Concept is a subset of the category if we look into that, and concept is a representation of a unit of knowledge with mental categories, mental objects or events associated to it. Category, on the other hand, is organized group of concepts that is taking into place. You have similarities among other concepts that could be seen under a category. And finally, you have a schema, and this schema is a mental framework of representation of the knowledge and the assumptions about the world that exists. So this whole concept was brought about under the representation of knowledge and how we actually organize the information in our long-term memory that we have already talked about. And moving with higher cognitive elements that we see, we are trying to use most of the long-term memory with minimum redundancy that could be seen. There could be serial reproduction, as what the Bartlett said, and that is what we call as the memory of constructive process, or memory as a constructive process, because we understand something for, let's say, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, we take a break, and then we say or explain that concept again, or ask the participants to repeat those concepts or recall what they have done. So this is what is a kind of serial reproduction or a constructive process. So whenever we are talking about schemas, it is a organization of the past reactions that have taken place, past experiences that have taken place, into a much more systematic form. The next is dual coding hypothesis. Now, coding hypothesis talks about image as a very concrete form of representation of any of the mental attributes that is there. So as soon as I say the word school, the first thing that comes into your mind is your own schooling. So what you see is a visual building of your school. So there could be classification of the concepts as concrete nouns and abstract nouns. Concrete nouns are those which are concretely coded into images. For example, cow. So this is a mental model where you can depict an image of an animal. On the other hand, there could be an abstract concept. An abstract concept could be a verbal or a descriptive code. A verbal or a descriptive code can be, let's say, speaking truth, being non-violent. So what are those? Those are abstract concepts that cannot be concrete in nature. So when we are talking about mental models, we are trying to assimilate both the concrete images as well as the verbal descriptions for the same. And there is where we are trying to understand the cooking, let's say, cooking process of any of the exotic dish that you like. So what you need to understand is the ingredients or the raw material, which becomes the concrete noun, and then the process of making, which becomes a abstract concept. So we try to assimilate both the concrete and the abstract concepts together. The next important concept is eyewitness and false memories. What is eyewitness? There was a very good example or an experiment that was done by Loftus, and Loftus basically talked about a scenario where a group of individuals witnessed a car accident, and then they were asked to report the incident. So what happens is the offense would be taken into consideration based on what the eyewitnesses have for the accused, and this could be manipulated. How? Let's say the eyewitnesses were shown a film where two cars smashed badly. So after seeing that film, when they are asked again about the same event or the offense that had happened, their responses might vary. Similarly, if I meet the eyewitnesses and say that the cars smashed or the cars contacted, there is a difference, and that difference would bring a difference into the answers that have been revealed by the eyewitnesses. So eyewitness memory is something that is very susceptible to the external phenomena that occur around it, and usually used in criminal proceedings, trials, court trials that are seen. The next is false memory. False memory means that the imagination of the events that did not take place become so powerful that you forget the actual incidents that took place. So let's say in the actual incidents, the two vehicles contacted, but then you were shown a movie or an incident where the two vehicles smashed badly. Now when you were asked to depict or reveal what had happened, there was a change in the aspect that was laid down, and this change was because of the generation of the false memory seen because of the film that was shown to you. Again, there was the ratings that were done, so there was a kind of constant thrust that was given onto your memory systems, and that led to generation of false memories and imagination of the events that did not take place actually. The next important thing is the repressed memories. Now what are repressed memories? Sometimes there are incidences which are very traumatic, very emotionally hurting to you, painful, threatening. So what you try to do is you try to keep them out from your memory and you try to forget those, and that is what are called as repressed memory. But in some cases what actually happens is a person loses a mental stable situation where he comes in a stage of fugue. Now this is a stage where a person tries to attain a new identity, a new name, or a new address. So when he gathers a kind of two personalities, one personality which does not know anything about the other personality that exists. There are cases associated with forgetfulness, amnesia, loss of memory that is seen with higher anxiety. A similar good example that you might witness in your daily life is forgetting during your examination, getting nervous during the exam and forgetting what to write into the examination is one of such examples. The next concept that we move forward with is forgetting. Now, forgetting, whenever the information that is brought to the long term memory is lost, we say there is a encoding error or there is misplacement of some of the information that takes place, and this leads to forgetting. What was an interesting experiment that was done was by Ebbinghaus, and he brought in nonsense syllabi and tried to ask or see how much retention actually takes place. Now, the studies reveal that the rate of forgetting is highest during the first 9 hours, and by around 3.5 hours, 3.5 days, you see only 25% of the content that you read is actually remembered in your mind. So this forgetting could be by three ways. It could be due to trace decay, it could be due to interference, or it could be due to retrieval failure. Retrieval failure is very, very simple, where I say I am unable to think what actually was in my mind, and there has been traces because of the time that has taken place or the associated concepts I have forgotten. So that is retrieval failure. I know the concept, but at the time of recall I am unable to produce those concepts. So might be with the retrieval cues, it could help me remember those concepts in a very apt fashion. The next is interference. Interference is either a kind of distraction that is into your actual systems. So it could be proactive or retroactive. Now what is the difference? Proactive means moving forward. That means the past is interfering with your learning systems. So in the past, if I know English language and now I am trying to learn French, this English which I had remembered in my past is interfering with my present French learning, and that is where you have a proactive interference. On the other hand, there is retroactive interference, which means there is a backward moving interference where new learning is interfering. So new learning is interfering. What does that mean? This implies that if now I am learning French, whatever is learned for English is not into my mind, and there is this new learning of the French that is interfering with my learning, and that is the retroactive interference that actually takes place. Whatever I have learned new is interfering with my past learning. The next is the forgetting due to trace decay. Trace decay is use-disuse theory, what we can say. So since you have not been using that concept for long, you start to forget those, and that is what is called as a trace decay. Usually when you remain awake during your waking conditions, there is the rate of forgetting, but this rate of forgetting increases when you are sleeping or you are in your sleeping conditions. So that is what is we call as forgetting due to trace decay. But be it whatever kind of forgetting, we can definitely enhance the memory by various ways. This could be mnemonics. So what could be good mnemonics that we could think of? It could be an image and a keyword. Let's say you want a child to remember what is cow. You can show a picture of the cow and ask the student to remember it. So that is image and keyword method that is adopted. The next is methods for organization, which could be in the form of chunking or the first letter technique. Chunking, what does it imply? Chunking implies that there is group of words that I say 190018001140. So what I'm trying to do is I can break this into groups of 4, 19001100. So what I'm trying to do is I am trying to chunk those, group those into smaller things and then remember those. First letter technique is very good example is when you try to remember the colors of the rainbow. Vibgyor, so violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange and red. So first letter of each of the colors. So V for violet, I for indigo, B for blue and so on. So this is what is the first letter technique. The next is the keyword method. Whatever you are trying to do, you are trying to bring in the most important thing out of it and understand this. For example, specifically when you are learning foreign languages, you are trying to rote memorize, but if you have some keyword associations, then it becomes much easy to remember and memorize. The next is method of loci. Method of loci means you are trying to put things into a serial order. So let's say I want to go out for shopping today and I want to bring in the household things. I have created a list of the items. When I go into the market, I remind myself, okay, for the kitchen I need these items, for the household appliances I need these items, and so on and so forth. So there is a kind of serial processing. I move from one room of my house to another place in my house and see what all requirements are there, and based on that I bring in all my shopping list or I complete the shopping list. The next is understanding why these mnemonics are actually beneficial. Mnemonics helps in deep level processing. So when you are doing a deep level processing, there is minimum interference. which can be because of the similar content being created by someone else. And there is retrieval cues, which is given by PQRST. So that's a very good mnemonic again to remember. P for preview, where you try to familiarize yourself with the existing content and you have a kind of quick overview of that. Q for questions that you raise. R for reading the lessons, S for self recitation of the lessons, and T for testing yourselves. So that is where you have PQRST, which is very important basis or the benefits of mnemonics, understanding the retrieval clues. So that was a very important and a basic fundamental on memory and forgetting. We will be covering many more lectures. Stay tuned. Have a wonderful day.